Please be seated. Well, I have to admit, this is a bit of a bummer. This has been quite the experience. I'm really going to miss this. Miss these faces, this congregation, your families, these holy moments that you invite me into every Sunday, every time we meet in hospital rooms, every time we meet in your homes. It's something I'm truly going to miss about this place. When Phil told me about this place when we interviewed over a year ago, he did a really good job of describing his context, to tell me about his incredible staff, the talented people that work here, about your dynamic ministries, about this large amount of activities that are going on in this lively, bustling place. And he also told me that you guys were very committed. You were just a committed bunch of people, especially when it came to this internship program. And I have to say, I have not been disappointed. I think what makes this thing work so well, this program I got to be blessed to be a part of, is that this community has this spirit moving through it. I think at first it was this spirit of generosity I encountered as you all enfolded me in this love and grace, welcomed me into your community, as me and my little family arrived in the 107-degree heat at the Boulder's apartment, and we have people who are helping me move in my furniture, and we get in there and find a pantry and a fridge full of food, a gift basket there to welcome me to town, and a warm dinner. It really meant something to me. I think it's a spirit that continually welcomed me into your homes then for those first few weeks, that continued through the whole experience into your lives. I call it also a spirit of trust. You allowed me to lead worship as a stranger, to preach this word as a stranger. You'd never met me, but you invited me to do this. You invited me to teach your children, to lead you yourselves in study. I would call that also a spirit that moves you to risk. There's faith there. There's a lot of faith in that, and I think that's what I'm going to miss, this spirit that moves through the place, a willingness to give a bit of yourselves to your interns, to let God do things through you. It's just inspiring. Now, I don't think that that's just something important in your story of how you relate with your interns as a hosting congregation. I think there's something important here about that spirit that's found in the story of our God and his people. See, as Lutherans, we put a lot of responsibility on God. We believe God grows this church. We believe it's God's spirit that moves through us, that brings us into that deeper relationship, that brings us into community with each other. However, I don't think that leaves us out of the equation entirely. I believe that God works through us. That's what you all have to say here. That's the first thing I saw when I came in, was this idea of God's heart, but human hands. It's reflected in our story here today when Jesus arrives to meet these 5,000 people, and he tries to wrangle up some dinner. Now, in my opinion, Jesus really could have done the wedding at Cana maneuver. He could have just gone, well, let's find some rocks and I'll make some bread. Or let's find some rocks, I'll turn it into fish. I don't know. He could have done something. He didn't have to put some of the responsibility on them, but he does. He wants this relationship. He asked them, where are we going to find a place to feed these folks? Now, at this point is where I want to highlight something. An important aspect of God's relationship and the responses we have to that request. The first response is Philip's, in which we can see that word of, what do you mean? We would need way more money than we got, way more money than we could make today to feed 5,000 people. In 6 months' wages, we couldn't give everybody one bite. It's an unreasonable amount of people for us to just feed out of nowhere. It isn't possible. Another question that might be going through his head through some of the other stuff is why? Why do we need to feed them? They came here. They want to hear the preacher at dinner time. They could bring a sack lunch. Where is it on us to do this? But it's not that odd. I don't think that response is too strange. I don't think it's faithless. It's a really natural approach, because I'm not saying that he doesn't want to feed them. I'm not saying that Philip's, no, get him out of here, send him away. He's just saying this doesn't seem like something where we can have that much of effect. Is it really possible to do what you're asking? In fact, Jesus' request comes off a bit absurd. That's typical. That's quite common. I mean, look around. It's reflected in individual responses, but it's really reflected often in these communal settings. How many congregations do you think are missing out on ministries, on outreach opportunities, kingdom work, because the reality is we just don't have enough to do it? I've worked in places like that have been very strapped for resources, who've wrestled with being in that same position. They had so very little. They really only had enough to provide just for worship opportunities on Sunday. But aside from that, they couldn't really make an effect because for so long they've been stretching themselves so thin with so little. I think a lot of congregations are in that spot, that Philip spot. We don't have enough to do this, Jesus. We can't be expected to, not like this, not with what we got. I think we find ourselves in that Philip spot as well. Big issues like hunger, world poverty, local poverty, violence in the world. I think there are many times it's impossible for us to wrap our heads around this idea that could really tackle these issues with any sort of certainty that we could pull it off, that we could actually do this. Can we even make that much of a difference? We just don't have enough. We can't do this all on our own. However, that isn't what Jesus is saying. That isn't God's expectation that we do this all on our own. That isn't the message at all. It's not just human hands. It's God's heart as well. The heart of God, the same God who could give sight to the blind. It's the same God who could cure the sick, who parted the seas. It's the same God who shaped the world out of a formless, shapeless void. It's that same God whose heart was revealed so clearly to us on a cross. Same heart revealed in an empty tomb. Same heart revealed in our story today. Where when something was considered not enough, he was able to feed 5,000 and then some. See, there's the other response to an impossible vision from God to do something that we just don't think we can. And it's Andrew's response. Andrew's response borders on naive. Question, where do we get enough food? And Andrew's answer is so silly, it's childish. He says, at 5 loaves, 2 fish. Is that a start? I mean, what's that going to do? It's Jesus' answer that's important. He essentially says, that'll do just fine. Have them sit down. See, Andrew's response, however naive it is a reflection of faith and of trust. It's a reflection of hope that perhaps with this, with all that we have, as meager as it is, Jesus can make it enough. At the mission assembly I got to go to, the ELCA had a word that I thought fit pretty appropriately. They called it living in daring confidence. Confidence that says our God takes what in reality seems like just a drop in the bucket and creates a cup that overflows. I mean, isn't that essentially what our God does throughout this whole story? Look at him as he takes these 12 misfits of disciples and manages to change the world, flip the world upside down with him. As he called Paul an enemy of the church and then created from him the enemy of the church, probably the greatest evangelist of all time. God makes so much out of the things we consider to be so very little. I think that's maybe what I love so much about this place, is a faith that reflects that idea. A confidence reflected here that says God will take your offerings, God will take your talents, your gifts, your time, your passions, your hands, and will do amazing things with them. I think you really do live into that. The other day, Mindy Schumann, who's on my internship committee, told me it's so hard when the intern leaves. She feels like when we go, we take a little piece of her with her. They become so attached that we take a piece. And that's been reflected by many of you, this idea that we take a bit of you with you. I want you to think about that. Your interns take a piece of you, each and every one of you, of this place with us. I will take a piece of you with me. I have to say, that is really, really, truly good news. Because that means I'm leaving here with a piece of your confidence in God. I'm leaving here with a piece of your willingness to give and be changed by these strangers who come in, these interns who show up on your doorstep. I'll carry with you this confidence in new styles, this trust in different types of ministries, changes. You're offering a bit of your own spirit of compassion, of love, and of grace. And although they are just a piece, just a little bit, God is using those things to form leaders. And in carrying that bit of your unleashed spirits with us, your interns go into other communities and they feed others with that same spirit. Your offerings to interns have fed many. I have heard about them. I've met them. And God willing, your offerings to feed many will continue. Now, I've been talking about the internship program a lot, but let's be honest. It's essentially what you are all doing in all of your ministries here that shape this place, and all the ministries that are giving bits of yourselves, risking and stretching yourself, giving what you have so that all may just have a taste, and they all may be fed. So that all of us may experience this taste of God's peace, this taste of God's radical grace. And however, even how powerfully effective you are here, I believe you know that you're called to more than that. That same daring confidence you have in God's grace and mercy that you share and express in this place is that same confidence that we're challenged to live with outside of these walls. To give a bit of ourselves outside of these walls in our efforts, in our time, with our talents, to continue revealing that fantastic truth in all that we do, in all of our interactions, in all of our relationships, in all of our own callings. The best we can is what we're challenged to do. And we do this trusting that by His power at work within us, God will be able to accomplish abundantly, far more than all we can ask or imagine, to quote Paul. So with that, I say, thank God. I say it again, thank God for that spirit of hope and trust residing in your hearts. For the Word made tangible in bread and wine. That bread and wine that sustains that daring confidence week in and week out. Thank God for the good news made tangible by your hands at work in the world. And most importantly, thank God for His boundless grace, revealed in Jesus Christ, which I'm reminded day in and day out is absolutely more than enough. Amen.